Yes, I'm with you, my love. It's the morning, just we two.
He's in the feed block, yeah.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in
Sorkin's at the A block. Can we get him on?
Yeah, we need to get Sorkin.
It says B block on the sheet, but Scott said.
Network will return from break in 4 minutes. The Scott Jennings Show on the Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 30 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Network returns from break in 3 minutes.
1039 LI News Radio.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return in 1 minute.
Young people speak in their minds are getting so much resistance from behind.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 40 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 30 seconds.
1,000 people in the street singing songs and carrying signs.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 15 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 5 seconds.
He's not just a conservative voice at CNN.
As the last man standing athwart the leftist mob. The fiery truth, surrounded, outnumbered, still undefeated. Fighting for free speech, Western civilization, and delivering common sense for the American people. Ladies and gentlemen, here's Scott Jennings.
Wednesday, October the 15th. We are live in Houston, Texas today, hosted by the Houston Automobile Dealers Association. I just walked off the stage after speaking to their annual luncheon. A great visit with the car guys here. Also met some great police officers from the Houston Police Department. So really nice to be here in Texas. Also want to welcome a new affiliate to the Scott Jennings Show. The new affiliate is in Riverhead, New York. 103.9 LI News Radio, WRCN. Welcome to Common Sense for the American people in Riverhead. It is the fastest growing show in syndicated radio. We also want to acknowledge this show's new sponsor. And I am so proud to partner with this sponsor. It's called Child Help. It makes me feel so good to know I'm going to be able to bring these stories to you from Child Help. Here's one about a little girl named Rebecca Baptiste. She was 10 years old. She was bright, full of life, and ready for the 5th grade. And she had 12 reports of suspected abuse. And then she died at the hands of people who should have protected her. Tragically, she's not alone. Every day in America, 6 children die from abuse or neglect. That is why this show is partnering with Child Help. They are an amazing organization fighting to end child abuse and to help these kids who are in crisis. For just $135, you can provide 5 children access to Child Help's 24/7 hotline, text, and chat counseling. They get connected with these trained crisis counselors who can make the difference between life and death. Here's how you do it. Go to scottjenningsshow.com. Up at the top of the screen, you'll see the Child Help banner. It's at the very top of scottjenningsshow.com. You click on the Child Help banner, and you can make your donation today. scottjenningsshow.com. Click the red banner. Help Child Help protect America's children. Things we're watching today in the news: Israel and Hamas began negotiating the second phase of a plan outlined by President Trump to end the war in Gaza. Hamas still has not returned several of the hostages that died in captivity, as they promised to do. Yesterday, they even gave the IDF a body that doesn't match any of the hostages. The Supreme Court today hearing arguments in a case that challenges the Voting Rights Act, Louisiana versus Calais. If the court strikes down Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, Republicans could eliminate upward of a dozen or more Democratic-held districts across the South. Could have major implications for the balance of power in the 2026 midterm. The shutdown drags on. Day 14, House Speaker Mike Johnson says the Republicans will simply not give in to the ridiculous Democratic demands and internal politics. Here's the Speaker.
That we just won't go along with. We won't sell out the long-term security and future of the United States so that Chuck Schumer can prevent a primary challenge from a wing. We will not be a part of that nonsense. And until Schumer and the left wing of his party are satisfied enough that the pain this shutdown has caused reached a limit that they're satisfied with, then the Republicans are going to stand here every single day, and we're going to continue to deliver the simple facts directly to the American people.
At 33 minutes past the hour, we have United States Senator Bernie Moreno of Ohio, who's joining us live for the latest on shutdown politics in Washington, D.C. That is the news for today. And now we turn our attention to a new book that has just been published. It's called 1929. The author is with us today. You see him on CNBC. His name is Andrew Ross Sorkin. He's one of the most prolific and well-known business journalists in America. Andrew, I want to thank you for joining us here on the Scott Jennings Show. Tell us, why did you write this book called 1929? Do we have Andrew on the line?
He's not talking. The line's connected.
Okay, I'm told that Andrew is there, but we're not hearing him. Okay, well, here's the deal. We have Andrew Ross Sorkin, who has written a book called 1929, and it is about the financial crash, the Great Depression, that happened in 1929.
Oh, okay, sorry.
there
Here
now.
I am. Here I am.
Hey, here we go, Andrew. Hey, brother.
Hey,
Thanks for joining us
hey,
on the. Yeah,
Scott.
thanks for coming on with us today. We're excited.
Thank you, brother. I'm so happy to be with you, Scott. I'm so happy to be with you. Thank you for having me. I always wanted to understand what was going on in 1929. I think we all have this impression that something very bad happened in 29 and that there was a crash and a correction. But I think most people, including myself, in truth, didn't really know the details of how it happened, what had happened, who the people were, who the characters were. I'd written this big book, Too Big to Fail, in 2008 about the financial crisis then. And a lot of people used to ask me questions about 29. And the truth was, I didn't know the answer. And so I went on this journey for the last 8 years to try to get down into the archives and really be able to retell the story almost in a kind of cinematic way. I always loved books like, Barbarians at the Gate and Den of Thieves, where you were like in the room. And that's what I tried to do with this. And the truth is there's so many characters and so many parallels. I hate to say it, not to say we're in 1929 today, but just in terms of what was going on in the 20s then and what's going on in the 20s now. And the people who were leading the world, whether they were the big bankers then or the politicians. I mean, there was a guy named Charlie Mitchell who was like the Jamie Dimon of his time then. And there was a guy named Carter Glass who was like the Elizabeth Warren of his time then. And all the kind of political battles that we're all having even now were also happening then.
So I've heard some of your interviews about the book, and it seems like you're talking a lot about bubbles, credit bubbles. Can you talk a little bit about what happened in 1929? That was really the beginning of the concept of credit. I mean, you had ordinary people that were investing for the first time, but they weren't doing it with money they had. They were doing it with credit that this concept, came up with, and everybody kind of bought into it.
Well, it was very interesting. Before 1919 in America, most people thought that it was a moral sin. Really a moral sin to take on credit, to take on a loan from somebody else. People didn't do that. And it happened in 1919 because General Motors decided they needed to sell more cars. So they started to loan money to people. And then Sears Roebuck said, people are willing to take a loan for that. Maybe we can give them money so they'll buy our appliances. And then the bankers said to themselves, okay, we can do this too. And we can loan you money so you can buy stocks. And it was sort of all under the guise of democratizing finance. And as a result, you had brokerage houses, especially in the major cities. And this was a period of time where a lot of the folks in the middle of the country were going to some of these cities. You had brokerage up on the corners of streets like Starbucks. And you could walk in there and you could give them $1 and they would literally loan you $10. And for a period of time, it was like free money. The stock market from the beginning of 1928 to the September of 1929 was up 90%. So all of these investors, it was really their first time ever doing this, were, making a killer. And then, of course, it all came undone.
Right. And today we have similar sort of Wild West conditions, I would argue, in the crypto space. You've got meme coins and all this stuff that, I wouldn't claim to understand, but a lot of people are into it and making money in it. Do you see parallels between the credit boom of the 20s and this Bitcoin, meme coin boom that we're living through right now?
A little bit. I worry. So one of the features of what was taking place, unfortunately, in the 20s was there was a lot of stock manipulation. In fact, there was no SEC. There were no rules. People could do almost whatever they wanted to. There was no insider trading laws or things like that. And when it comes to meme coins and things like that, not necessarily Bitcoin, but when it comes to meme coins that people are playing with and trading, there is a lot of folks who are trying to sort of corner the market. I think that I have a little bit of anxiety. And look, more broadly, as crypto becomes a bigger part of our economy, there's a lot of people obviously bought into Bitcoin. But, the new Genius Act that the Trump administration, has put into place with Congress is going to allow people to invest more in crypto. In fact, you'll be able to put crypto into your 401k plan, and you'll be able to put venture capital and private equity and other things like that. So, you want people to have access. You want to democratize this stuff, but I also think, at least initially, you need to do it carefully.
His name is Andrew Sorkin. You see him on CNBC. He has a brand new book out called 1929 about the crash of 1929 and the factors that led up to that. He's going to stay with us through the break, and we'll continue our conversation about this fascinating new book, which you can buy today. I would advise you Go on Amazon or wherever you get your books and type in 1929 Andrew Sorkin. You can get the book right now. First, a word from our friends at Relief Factor. Our friend Travis sent us a note. He said before Relief Factor, it took him an hour to walk a mile. Today, he could do 4 miles in that same hour because he's taking Relief Factor. These are real people sending us these notes. Get on their 3-week quick start today if you want to get the same results as Travis. Go to relieffactor.com, call 1-800-4RELIEF. My dad texted me and he said, we're out of Relief Factor. We got to get some more bags of Relief Factor. I don't think anybody in the Jennings household has enjoyed this more than my father, and I am so glad that he is enjoying the benefits of Relief Factor. Visit relieffactor.com or call 1-800-4RELIEF to get Relief Factor. More with Andrew Sorkin when we come back. It's Common Sense for the American People. Scott Jennings on the Salem Radio Network.
If I come out like a dream, will you let me show you what I mean? Will you let me come on inside?
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 4 minutes.
All I want is a remedy for all of the things that are me. Ooh, I will take a look. Please.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 30 seconds.
Baby, why you got your head? Why you always keep with your mother's head?
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes.
Tell me, did the other children's going on you? If I come on like a dream, ooh, will you let me show you what I mean? Let me come.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
All I want is a remedy for all of the things I would only take a note to please.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 2 minutes. The Scott Jennings Show Radio Network will return from break in 1 minute and 30 seconds.
I need a remedy, yeah, for what is ailing me, you see. I need a remedy for what is ailing me. I need a remedy, yeah, for what's ailing me. If I only had a remedy,
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return in 1 minute.
oh, you see, I'm finding. Oh, I really want it. You see, I'm needing.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 45 seconds.
Oh, I feel I just want to say. I need a remedy.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 30 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 15 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 5 seconds.
The southern wind sings again a night a lullaby.
Conversations and stories you simply won't hear from the mainstream media. It's the Scott Jennings Show.
And the beast will crack the leaves like a daytime campfire burning.
Inside the greatest crash in Wall Street history and how it shattered a nation. The author is Andrew Ross Sorkin. You see him on CNBC. And for a long time, Andrew has been one of the most important and most prolific business journalists in the United States of America. That body of work that you've produced over the course of your life, sir, I think makes picking up this book essential for people who want to understand our country's financial history. Now, you mentioned that you had previously wrote a book about the financial crash of 2008. Should we consider these books to be linked? Is it part of a series that you're working on here, or do you consider them to be completely separate items?
Well, in many ways, Scott, I think of this as a prequel to Fail, which we turned into a movie for. And I wrote it in part because I'm hoping if we understand the lessons of 2008 and maybe now 1929, I won't ever have to write a sequel. I hope that we're never going to have or at least something that's as economically calamitous as we've had in the past. But I linked in terms of the way I've sort of approached the writing, that the idea of putting you in the room, the sort of cinematic narrative way I've tried to do it, and to really get in the archives. So every quote when you're seeing, Hoover talking to Roosevelt, or you're hearing, a banker talking to his wife in the kitchen, those are all things that I found in the archives of memos and notes and letters. I got the Federal Reserve to give me the board minutes from that period for the first time in practically 100 years. No one's seen them. So there's a lot of things I think that hopefully also get unearthed.
In your research for the book, did you find that people generally had no idea they were on the brink of calamity? I mean, things seemed fine. I mean, the stock market was up, as you pointed out, in 1929, and then all of a sudden they had the crash. Did people know something was brewing? Nothing was brewing? What was the mood right before it happened?
The mood was jubilance. People always wanted to believe. And there were people who were Cassandras. So there were people out there, including people like Charles Merrill of Merrill Lynch. He had been out there in 1928 telling people, sell all your stocks. There was a guy named Roger Babson who started Babson University, by the way. He was out there telling people, get out of the market. There was a famous trader named Jesse Livermore who was a short seller. He bet against the market. And in fact, he made $100 million during the crash. He thought it was going to go down. But for the most part, most people thought it was going to go, or at least said they thought it was going to go up, in part because you had an administration in the Hoover administration at the time telling people things were okay. And you had all the bankers on Wall Street saying, don't worry, folks.
Are we in the same situation today? I mean, the market is going up and up, and we have momentary hits to the market based on world events. But boy, we're in an incredible position in the market right now. I mean, how do you feel? You cover this stuff. You're looking at macroeconomic data. You've studied the history here. How should people feel about the stock market today?
So look, I think what's happening is there is a very exciting and real artificial intelligence boom in America. And it's not just the technology companies that are benefiting. You're seeing data centers get put up all over the country. This administration's been pushing for that to happen. And what you're seeing in that context is it's impacting the energy companies. They're getting more money. Construction companies are getting money. Fab companies, real estate. So it's happening. It is real money. I don't want to say it's not, but I do think that it is maybe distracting us from other parts of the economy that I think are more challenged in different parts. Manufacturing, I think, is still a challenged part of the economy. And the truth is that I also think we have a little bit of inflation in our economy now that is a bit of related to where the tariffs that we've been debating in Washington and around the world. By the way, we had tariffs in 1930. That was actually one of the dominoes that really led to the Great Depression. I'm hoping that's not going to be the case this time, but I do think the tariff issue is definitely weighing on our economy to some degree.
We've got about 20 seconds left, Andrew. I'll give you the last word. Do you think it is likely or unlikely the U.S. Supreme Court tosses out the president's tariffs when they take up the case this fall?
Ooh, it's a great, great question. I think that they may toss out the tariffs, but the tariffs don't go away. I think there's a permanence to the tariffs. He can bring them a couple of other different venues and avenues. It'll be a little bit different, but I think it's going to cause a lot of commotion next year.
His name is Andrew Ross Sorkin. He's got a book called 1929, Inside the Greatest Crash in Wall Street History and How It Shattered a Nation. You go on Amazon right now and type in 1929. It's got a red cover and has 1929 on it, and it says bestseller. Andrew, we wish you all the best with this book. Congratulations. It's not easy to put out a book. 8 years it took you to write this book, and we hope you achieve great success on it. We're going to come back after this commercial break with Senator Bernie Moreno of Ohio. It's common sense for the American people. Scott Jennings here on the Salem Radio Network.
Disappear just like the tide, let it roll on by and jump right in. Let the music pull you in. You can jump right in. Oh, and lose yourself again.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 5 minutes.
Run down. I don't know why I let that mean woman make me a fool. She took all my money.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 4 minutes and 30 seconds.
Now she's with one of my good time buddies. They're drinking in some crosstown bar. Sometimes I feel like I've been tied to the whipping post. Tied to the whipping post.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 4 minutes.
I feel like I'm dying.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network. Break in 3 minutes and 30 seconds.
My friends tell me that I've been such a fool.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes.
Oh, for loving you. Drown myself in sorrow as I look at what you've done. But nothing changed. The bad times stay the same, and I can't run.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
I'm dying.
Yeah.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio will return from break in 2 minutes. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will from break in 1 minute and 30 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Radio Network will return in 1 minute. The Scott Jennings Show on the Radio Network will return for break in 40 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show, Salem Radio Network, return from break in 30 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 15 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 5 seconds.
Common sense for the American people. This is the Scott Jennings Show.
It's Wednesday, October the 15th. Scott Jennings broadcasting live today from Houston, Texas, where I was the special guest of the Houston Automobile Dealers Association at their annual luncheon. We appreciate their hospitality and the invitation to get down here to Houston. A little breaking news update before we get to our next interview. Secretary Pete Hegseth's airplane, he was flying back from the Europe to the United States, had an emergency on board today. They were out over the Atlantic Ocean. It dropped to 10,000 feet and had to turn around and go back to the United Kingdom. What we're hearing is that the windshield cracked mid-flight. And so the pilot dropped the plane down to 10,000 feet, but he has now landed at Royal Air Force Mildenhall, which is a British Air Force base, following that emergency being declared on board. So an emergency aboard Pete Hegseth's plane, but he's on the ground safely in the United Kingdom, thank goodness. Joining us here on the Scott Jennings Show to discuss what's going on in Washington, D.C., my friend, Ohio Senator Bernie Moreno is on the line. Senator, thank you so much for joining us. You and I were supposed to be here in Houston today, but you have been detained back in Washington, D.C. because these Democrats refuse to open the federal government. Can you give us the latest from inside the Capitol? Any idea whether the Dems are going to come to their senses anytime soon?
Well, first of all, I hope you enjoyed meeting with my people. The car dealers are great, as you mentioned, and certainly miss being there with them. But we've done a lot of great things for the auto business this year. Restored something called consumer choice. People can buy whatever car they want without the government intervening in that transaction. So great news for that. In terms of what's going on here, Scott, it's pretty straightforward. Virtually every single Republican has voted to reopen the government now 9 times. 3 Democrats have joined us. Fetterman being the tip of the spear, saying this is stupid. It's their budget. They voted for it 13 times in a row, including in December, this past December. We need 5 more Democrats to come to their senses. Look, at the end of the day, they're so taken by their radicals and their party. Chris Murphy is going to have a ball being the first No Kings speaker on Saturday. So, of course, he wants to say that he's fighting hard. But when Chris Murphy and Crockett are the moral center of your party, you know the party's in trouble.
So a big issue that Democrats are hanging their hats on here has to do with these Obamacare health insurance plan subsidies. These subsidies were put in place during COVID. So we were paying people to cover their health insurance. This was a COVID era program. Now we're not in COVID anymore, but they want to keep this going in perpetuity. Where do you come down on this? Do we need the subsidies? Is it time to let go of this COVID era program? How should Republicans approach and be thinking about this subsidy issue?
Well, first, it makes it crystal clear that Obamacare has been an abject disaster because it actually made healthcare unaffordable. That's the reality. Now, in terms of these COVID era subsidies, you're exactly right. They were for 1 year. That was the deal. We're going to do these $0 premiums, $0 premiums for 1 year. They blew out the income cap. So typically, subsidies have a percentage of poverty level. So in this case, 400%. They blew past that. A 1 year temporary deal. Because remember, during COVID, they used it as a way to dramatically increase government spending, like 40-50% increase from 1 year to the other. That's why we have these crazy deficits. In 22, they said we're going to extend 3 more years because they thought COVID wasn't quite over yet. Joe Manchin, God bless him, said, hey, these things are filled with fraud. You got brokers signing people up. They don't even know they have these plans. The data tells us there's probably 60% of these premiums are for people who actually don't even know they have them. So it's just a direct transfer payment from the taxpayer to insurance companies. Manchin wanted reforms, but on brand, after many long discussions with Schumer, he caved the reforms of the program. And the Democrats, and this is the most important point here, the Democrats set the expiration date to be December of 2025. If they wanted them to, they could have done that back in 2022. There's a cover story for why they shut down the government. As you know, they lie with impunity. They have no moral trepidation about not telling the truth. And of course, most of the media just echoes their lies and makes them out to be truth, but they're not. So this is the reality of what's actually going on. We're happy to negotiate on health care, but we're not going to do it with a gun to our head and with the specter of closing our government. Because if we allow them to do this, this will be the predicate for every conversation we have with Democrats for the next 3 years.
Speaker Johnson said today that they will not give in. Where are your colleagues in the Senate? Do you sense that people are ready to try to do something here, or is there resolve in the Senate Republican conference to, not give in to, I mean, look, it's they're holding the federal government hostage. I mean, that is what the Democrats are doing. Where's the conference?
The conference is extraordinarily united. Look, the good news for us is the Democrats are so crazy, Scott, that it makes it easy, right? They want to restore health insurance for non-citizens. I think most Americans, if you walk to a coffee shop where you are today and you walk in there and say, hey, I'm taking a poll, how much taxpayer money should be used to non-citizens? The answer would be zero.
Right.
The Democrats want that to be tens of billions of dollars. That's insane. They want transgender surgeries on children paid for by the taxpayers. Abortion on demand paid for by taxpayers. They want to add $1.5 trillion to our government spending in exchange for basically now 10 days more of government funding. Their proposals are not based in any reality. The conference is fully united to give them their budget until the end of November to allow us to finish the appropriations process.
Now, you made a little bit of news the other day when you said on TV that, in your mind, ending the filibuster rules in the Senate should be on the table in order to maybe reopen the government. Senator Thune, the Republican leader, threw a little cold water on that, and there have been a lot of debates about this over the years inside the party. Where are you on this today? Are you still thinking that's on the table or not on the table?
Well, what I said is, look, if this goes on for too much longer, meaning months, we can't take any tools off the table. That's number one. So I'm not suggesting we do it. I'm saying we don't take any tools off the table. Where I am right now, obvious room for reform on Senate rules. I think, for example, a threshold of 55 votes for budgeting makes sense to me, appropriation and continuing resolutions, as long as 2 rules apply. You're not increasing spending, and you're not raising taxes. If you're doing those two things, that requires 60. If you're not doing either of those two things, raising taxes or raising spending, I think 55 is something that we should consider as a more appropriate threshold. That's my point of view. I don't know that I have the majority of the body there, but this is why I think it's important to have more outsiders here in Washington, D.C., Scott, people who just take a fresh set of eyes. And maybe, by the way, the answer is we don't do anything at all, but absolutely dismissing it as a possibility, I think, is a mistake.
Now let's talk a little politics in Ohio. It looks like the Ohio legislature is going to draw a new map. I think you've been part of those discussions a little bit. Can you tell us how is that going in Ohio, and is it going to result in new seats for the Republicans in your home state?
Well, first of all, we have to do it because it's required by our Constitution. So the last time we went through redistricting, the Democrats didn't vote for the map, so it became a temporary map. So we have to follow the Constitution and do it. So this is not a politically motivated exercise. It's required by our Constitution. We have 15 seats. By the way, we should have 16 or 17 if we did appropriation and got rid of illegals, but conversation. So we have 15 now, 10 Republicans, 5 Democrats. There's 3 districts down in the Cincinnati area, up in Toledo, and in Akron, where I think those districts, if they were drawn accurately, would open the door for Republicans to defeat 3 uniquely terrible Democrats. We have the misfortune of being blessed with some of the worst members of the House just completely inept. We have a terrible representative that's been there 44 years, Scott. Wow. 44 years up in Toledo. Disaster. We have a congressperson in Akron that doesn't even live there. She lives in Columbus. And then we have a just basically wallpaper down in Cincinnati. And the people of Cincinnati deserve better representation. So I think we can get to a 13-2 map in Ohio by the time this is done.
Okay, and your old adversary, Sherrod Brown, who you defeated, is back and is running in this special election to fight against John Husted, who took over after J.D. Vance was elected vice president. Give us an update on the race. Is Senator Husted in a good position to hold the seat?
Well, look, I've taken a look at some of Sherrod Brown's public appearances, and the man should be running, but not for office. I mean, holy Lord, Scott. You're supposed to lose weight after you leave office. So that's number one. Number two, he's got no energy. This guy's got no enthusiasm. He's lost his mojo. It's important for everybody to understand what happened in my election. Kamala Harris got 44.5% of the vote. Sherrod Brown got 46.5%. He only outran the national ticket by 2%. They funded a third-party candidate with $20 million, saying that this guy was even more conservative than Moreno. So that took a little bit off of my lead. But I'm a guy, Scott, that 3 years ago had a 1% chance of winning a Senate election. 1%. Sherrod Brown had won 18 and 19 elections. He'd been in office for over 50 years in one position or another. This is the definition of a career politician. His case that he has to make to the people of Ohio is that in his late 70s, he's the guy that's going to bring new energy and new perspective to D.C. That's a joke. I mean, this guy should just retire with dignity, find a job. Evidently, is very difficult. So maybe, Scott, you have a good platform. Let's start a GoFundMe page to get Sherrod Brown a job, for God's sake. The guy just needs a job.
All right, that's Senator Bernie Moreno of the great state of Ohio. We're going to hold you over through this commercial break and keep talking politics in Ohio when we come back. Thanks for your time today. And I want to give you a quick word from our friends at Pure Talk Wireless. You know, it's my wireless company. And the company believes that our society works because of the freedoms guaranteed by the First Amendment. Everyday Americans should be able to speak openly and honestly about their values, about family and traditions that they hold dear, and they should be able to do it without fear of retribution. That is a principle that Pure Talk proudly supports. They sponsor my show, and that allows me to stand strong behind this microphone every day and share the truth and common sense for the American people with all of you. If you want to support brands that defend freedom and pro-American values, I encourage you to switch your wireless service to Pure Talk. You're going to get the great 5G coverage. It's an extremely reliable and secure network. And some of their plans are $25 a month. When's the last time your cell phone bill was $25 a month? You will save money. If you switch to Pure Talk, you will save money. They believe in creating American jobs and supporting small businesses. If you're a small business owner, you can save even more while enjoying their white glove service. You should stand with companies who share your values. And here's how you do it. You dial pound 250, so the little pound sign, 250, and you say Scott Jennings, and you switch over to my wireless company. It's called Pure Talk right now. Do it now, and you'll save an additional 50% on your first month. Dial pound 250, say Scott Jennings, and switch to Pure Talk Wireless. You will not regret it. It's my wireless company. It's America Wireless Company, and you should do it today. When we come back after this break, more with one of the great young dynamic senators in Washington, D.C. Ohio's Bernie Moreno is our guest. It's common sense for the American people. Scott Jennings on the Salem Radio Network.
The fastest growing show on syndicated radio. Welcome aboard. This is the Scott Jennings Show.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 2 minutes and 30 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 2 minutes. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 1 minute and 30 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return in 1 minute. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 45 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 30 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 15 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 5 seconds.
One minute. standing tall against the leftist mob. Jennings.
Okay, on Wednesday, October the 15th, a little breaking news here. President Trump has signed an order mandating the payment of active duty American troops today on October the 15th, despite the Democrats' government shutdown. The president has come through for the armed forces. We're going to talk to Senator Bernie Moreno about that from Ohio in just 1 second. First, a word from our friends at forfreemarkets.com. Under the Obama and Biden administrations, regulators pressured banks to close accounts for industries and people they didn't like. It was called debanking. You've heard of it. They trampled on the freedoms of American businesses and citizens, and they put government in the business of punishing people they disagreed with. Thankfully, President Trump is taking decisive action to stop it. He has an executive order on this, but lasting reform requires more than one order. It needs Congress to act. That's why Americans for Free Markets is thanking President Trump for standing up for freedom and urging Congress to follow his lead. Together, they can establish a national fair access standard to prevent services from being denied based on politics, social, or religious views. To protect the financial freedom of every American, Congress must build on President Trump's leadership, update these laws, and codify his executive order. Americans for Free Markets is calling on Congress to ensure the abuse of power debanking never happens again. Learn more at forfreemarkets.com. That's FOR freemarkets.com. It's common sense for the American people. Scott Jennings here on the Salem Radio Network. Our guest is Senator Bernie Moreno of Ohio. Senator, we just got the breaking news that the president has signed the order so that the American military can get paid despite the government shutdown. It's real leadership from the president here, because had he not made this move, our troops would have gone without a paycheck today. Really strong leadership moment, I think, for the White House.
Yeah, no question. Look, at the end of the day, it's really disgusting how Schumer's used this shutdown to put our military families, our government employees, ICE workers, DHS workers, our Border Patrol as pawns in this political game. You saw the quote, every day that this goes on, it gets better for us. Well, it may be getting better for them. It's not getting better for the U.S. And that's who Schumer is. This is a person that obviously likes politics more than he loves this country. And that's the difference between these people that have been here too long, their brain gets rotten, and people who come in here just want to serve the country, love the country, and want to bring common sense back to it. This is really what we're talking about, Scott. As you know, you've been preaching. It's a revolution of common sense.
Yeah, the president coining that phrase in his inaugural address and kind of rebranding our politics in that way. I mean, I've heard him say many times, it's not conservative, it's not liberal, it's just common sense, trying to do the right thing. And what most people would agree is the common sense thing. And what we see the Democrats doing in Washington right now is the opposite of that. And they're being extremely dishonest in their arguments as they do it. Senator, before we go, I did want to make mention, you talked about being in the automobile industry at the top of this interview. Another passion of yours has been crypto. You have been working on policy around crypto. How do you feel like that's going now with Trump in office for several months, the Genius Act passed? How are you feeling about the future of crypto? I know it's a passion of yours.
No, really strong focus. Obviously, the stablecoin bill, Genius Act, was a huge deal. I was in Northern Europe in August. I can tell you the Europeans are absolutely scared out of their minds because we leapfrogged them dramatically with stablecoin legislation. We got to get this market structure legislation done. I'm hoping that we can mark that up as early as next week. What's keeping us from doing that is you have Democrats that just are wholly not knowledgeable. Scott, it's like talking to somebody who's never understood religion and talking to them about theology. They just truly don't understand the topic. So we got to get past their lack of knowledge. But if we can get a markup next week and get the bill on the floor in November, get it passed before Thanksgiving, it's going to absolutely set a framework so that the U.S. will be at the absolute tip of the spear of the revolution of financial services and payments. The way we do payments and financial services today compared to what we're going to be doing in even 5 years will be the difference between how you get a movie on Netflix versus the way it used to be when you and I were kids and we went to to Blockbuster Video. I mean, it is that much of a revolution that's going to happen.
Senator, we get some messages from listeners during the show, and you're pleased to get Sherrod Brown a job in Ohio. Somebody just sent me a note and said there are currently 238 openings at area McDonald's in Greater Columbus. So there are opportunities if Sherrod Brown, if this politics thing doesn't work out, and it doesn't sound like it's going to, there are opportunities in Ohio. Senator Moreno of Ohio, you've been a great guest. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll be praying for you as you try to wrangle these Democrats to get the shutdown taken care of in Washington, D.C. Also, thank Andrew Sorkin for coming on and buy his book, 1929. Back again tomorrow. It's Common Sense for the American People. Scott Jennings on the Salem Radio Network.
Fighting for free speech and Western civilization. This is the Scott Jennings Show.